Hi everybody, it's Amy and welcome to the channel, or welcome back. I hope that you're doing well. Let me know how you're doing in the comments. Today we are doing one of my favorite videos. We are doing all things pirate books. When it comes to summer, that is my vibe. That is what I'm into as far as reading. I think pirate books, high seas adventures, a little bit of magic sprinkled in there. That is what I want for the summer. I am doing this a little bit differently than I have done in the past couple of years. I'm doing recommendations, but also giving you like what I'm reading right now and what I plan to read, my TBR for the rest of the summer. I'm not just reading pirate books, I do have other things like intermixed, but this is definitely what my heart wants during the summer. And I've tried to get like summer vibes. I'm wearing a bit of a longer shirt because I got stung by a yellow jacket, and you guys don't want to see that. But I thought it was kind of a cool piratey looking shirt, I don't know. But I've got my starfish earrings. If you've seen Aquamarine, you know what I'm talking about. My shell necklace, some bracelets with a flip-flop. I've got the pirate vibes going on, and I am definitely in my summer mindset. I'm in Florida, it's hot here, so we've got all the summer vibes going on. But as you were letting me know how you're doing in the comments, I am gonna get into some recommendations. Obviously, I love the pirate genre, but I think what really it is that I love about it at its core is how it kind of creates this like found family on a big ship. There's big adventures, but it talks about like acceptance and community for people who have been ostracized by society. I think when you think of pirates, it's like, oh, they're criminals and things like that. And I think with more modern pirate stories, it's a little bit more just like morally gray. We do have some criminals, but I just really like that there's kind of this like redemption story, there's community, there's found family, and that's definitely the case with this series, the World of the Narrows series by Adrian Young, which starts with Fable and Namesake, which is kind of a duology, and then we have a prequel, Saint, and then there are a couple of other books attached to this series, so there's a lot here to unpack, but this is a really great YA kind of light fantasy with a lot of pirate vibes. I'm just gonna hold up the first book for now, but The World of the Narrows, starting with Fable, features our main character named Fable, who is abandoned by her father on these really treacherous islands where there are these cutthroat gem traders who very much have pirate vibes. There is a lot of betrayal and politics, and she's just trying to navigate for her freedom and to be a part of her family legacy, ironically, but she kind of joins this pirate crew and the story goes from there. But we have found family, we have romance, we have high seas adventures. There's a little bit of magic in here. It's more of a lighter fantasy. But even though this is YA, it doesn't really feel YA. I really like the kind of dark and brooding sort of tone that Adrian Young writes in. I just ate up her writing, and this was a really good audiobook series. So definitely recommend that. I ate it up in a couple of days, the duology and the prequel, and I just cannot say enough about this. I just really love these books. They're pretty short to get through, but such great atmosphere and adventure. Kind of in the same vein and having the same structure is The Daughter of the Pirate King series by Tricia Levenseller. So we have a duology. I only have the first book, but there's a duology, and then we have another book that is attached that features another main character. But this is such a fantastic YA fantasy series, but it doesn't feel YA. It is very adult. This is about a pirate princess who kind of goes undercover, and she's trying to prove her worth to her father, and she ends up battling sea monsters and having like these cutthroat pirate battles, and it is just a classic good time. But she is definitely a chaotic character. I really loved her as a main character, and we definitely have themes of like power, and there is love in here as well, and family legacy. So this is maybe sounding similar to The World of the Narrows, but it is very different. But I just really love the characters in here, and it had some pretty like fierce fighting scenes. I was pretty surprised by how like adult this one got for being YA, but definitely recommend. Next up is actually the book from my previous video where I gave a full in-depth review and analysis, so if you want more on this book, you can go and check that out. But this is The Adventures of Amina Al-Sirafi by Shannon Chakraborty, who also wrote the Daevabad trilogy, which I absolutely love. And this is a Middle Eastern-inspired fantasy kind of set in medieval times, and we are following Amina, who is a middle-aged mom and a retired pirate who is pulled back into one last job and adventure, and she reunites with her crew on her legendary ship, and they just go on some crazy adventures together. I highly recommend this book, and definitely go check out my previous video to get a full rundown on this. Next up is a trilogy that I'm working on finishing. I am like 60% through the very last book, but that is the Liveship Trader trilogy by Robin Hobb. Now, let me explain this really quickly. It might sound complex to those who are not familiar with it, but this is part of a larger fantasy series, a 16-book series by Robin Hobb, The Realm of the Elderlings. It's broken off into multiple like little trilogies and quartets. This is the second trilogy within that greater series. So, if you want like all of the knowledge and understanding, Easter eggs, things like that, I would definitely recommend reading the Farseer trilogy, which precedes this, in order to get all of the information. I understand not everybody wants to read a 16-book series. It is like my goal to finish that. I'm reading it slowly with my husband. If you want just like the pirate high seas adventure vibes, then you could read this by itself. I personally don't know if I would recommend that, just because it would ruin the previous trilogy for you. And this is like totally different characters, but it does like build out more of the world of this greater fantasy series, The Realm of the Elderlings. So it's really up to you. I definitely would encourage you to do your research about the Realm of the Elderlings. It is definitely an in-depth kind of fantasy, but this is a fantastic trilogy. Robin Hobb's writing is so incredible, and this is a really interesting and fairly complex fantasy series. This is about a family of traders, like merchant traders, who sail on sentient ships. So they are alive, they have personalities, and it is very complex. We have like complex family dynamics, we have pirates, we have local to like higher up government politics. There's a lot going on in this series, but I think the highlight of Robin Hobb's writing is the character work. We have some amazing characters. Everybody is not squeaky clean. Definitely have like morally gray characters. There are going to be some that you absolutely hate. I would definitely check up trigger warnings on this. There is like SA and things like that. It can get a little bit weird, but if you like just a like intense fantasy with just incredible writing, but something that's more adult, higher fantasy, I would definitely recommend getting into her books. And again, you could read this by itself, but no, you're probably going to be ruining the Farseer trilogy, which precedes this in The Realm of the Elderlings. If you have any questions about it, definitely leave them for me in the comments. A book that I read last year, and I got a copy of it from my library sale recently, that is The Song of the Current by Sarah Tulser. So this is about a female main character who is born on the river into kind of a smuggling trade. So there's definitely a smuggling, we have sabotage, we have a lot of self-discovery within this. I have only read the first book, but this is a duology. But in this one, we are kind of getting thrown into a plot of having to deliver a mysterious, like, smuggled item. So there is some really interesting things that happen in this, and we go kind of like from river to high seas. We have a really interesting crew. There's some romance in here as well. Some really interesting politics in this. This was just, it had a really unique feel to it. It, again, didn't really feel YA. This was a more adult feeling YA fantasy, and it had a lot of like technical jargon for sailing, so if that would throw you off, I don't know if I would recommend this. It's not terrible or anything like that, but it definitely is something that stood out to me. But if you want something that has a little bit of a different feel, has some interesting politics to it, some hidden identities and things like that. I would definitely recommend this. Next up is a YA fantasy that I finished pretty recently, and that is A Clash of Steel by C.B. Lee. This is a more YA feeling book, but it is a retelling of Treasure Island. So you kind of get some of the structure of like the classic story, but this is set in 19th century China, and we have a sapphic romance at the core of this story, and it is just a really fun time. It has some really interesting like historical references, including a very famous pirate queen who actually lived. She apparently was one of the most successful pirates to ever live, which was really fascinating. And this just had some really cool, like classic, treasure hunting adventure, but it definitely has like this coming of age and understanding your own identity, like within the sapphic romance and everything. So if you like the sound of that, I would definitely recommend this. And definitely if you want some more like queer representation. Next up on my list, I actually don't have a physical copy of because I read it as an e-arc, but that is Compass and Blade by Rachel Greenlaw. This is an ongoing YA fantasy series. The second book is out. I have not read it, but this was definitely more like YA feeling, but this is about a girl who lives on these islands where there's like rocky coasts, and so there's ships wrecking there all the time, so she's part of like a wrecking crew, and they kind of go and plunder these wrecked ships, but there's kind of this weird like governmental takeover and some controversy that happens. So in order to save her village and family, she has to go on this adventure to basically find her long lost mother, and she's accepted by this mysterious pirate crew, and she kind of goes on this adventure where she finds maybe some ancient secret magic and discovers some secrets about her family's past. So there's definitely some intriguing things going on in here, but if you want something that feels a little bit more YA, I would recommend this. Alright guys, those are my recommendations. I hope that you got something from that, and definitely let me know if you've read any of those. But let's get into what I am currently reading. So right now with our book club, The Appendix, over on the Fable app, we are reading The Bone Ships, and that is the first book of the Tide Child trilogy by R.J. Barker. This is definitely a adult pirate fantasy trilogy. It is definitely like kind of dark and brooding, and it is a much like higher fantasy. We definitely have like a whole new language that these pirates speak, so it took me a little bit to kind of get used to the terms and the way that they speak. I actually kind of switched to audiobook to get more of like the inflection and how words are used, and actually is helping me understand better. But I am really enjoying this now that I'm into it and kind of have like the flow and understanding of the language. But this is basically a trilogy about pirates where they have ships that are made of like dead sea dragon bones. And so yes, literally bone ships, and them kind of like having to navigate these treacherous seas and like high stakes battles with other pirate groups and a potential threat that is coming from under the sea. So there's a lot going on in here, some really interesting politics, some really interesting characters. We have this like really like hardcore like female pirate captain, and we have a main character who's kind of like under her, but she is very interesting, and really interesting like political structure in this, and definitely a lot of like found family and things like that. But I'm really interested to see where the rest of the story is going to go. I think I'm like 50-ish% through, but I'm really enjoying it, and definitely encourage you to come and join us as we are kind of finishing up for the month of June. All right. Let's get into the TBR, what I am going to be reading for the rest of the summer. And definitely going to be finishing up the Bone Ship trilogy. That is kind of the plan for the book club as far as what we're going to be reading for the summer. So going to be reading like in June, the first book, The Bone Ships, then the second book in July, and the third book in August. So definitely come again and join us for that journey. And then I am definitely wanting to finish Ship of Destiny, which is the third book of the Liveship Traders series, which I talked about earlier. I love that series so much, but my husband and I actually sit down and read it together. And like we listen to the audiobook and like look at the like ebook, so like immersion reading together. I used to read it out loud, but it is really rough on the voice to read out loud for a couple of hours. So that is what we have been working through, but we just kind of like got really slowed down with it, watching a lot more like anime and things like that recently. But definitely want to finish that before the summer is over. Next on my list are books that I bought from the library or I'm getting on Libby, but I do have one that I bought from a local author at like a local book fair, so excited to talk about that. But first from the library is Dark Water Daughter by H.M. Long, the first book of the Winter Sea series. So according to my notes, this is about a storm summoning woman who joins a pirate crew to escape her past and harness her powers in a gritty, magic-infused nautical world. So I have heard that this is dark and kind of brooding, but I've heard really good things about this trilogy, so I am very excited to get to it. Next up is the addition to the Daughter of the Pirate King series, and that is The Vengeance of the Pirate Queen by Tricia Levenseller. So again, this is the additional book to the world of the duology I talked about earlier, and this is a cool kind of special edition of this book. It's got cool like sprayed edges. But according to my notes, when sent on a high-stakes mission to prove herself, fierce pirate Serinda uncovers a deadly secret tied to her past, alongside a slow-burn romance and plenty of sword fights in this action-packed romantic adventure. So this sounds really good, and I'm definitely curious about this additional character. I don't remember them being in the previous books, but definitely excited to get this one. And this again is a YA pirate fantasy, but probably not going to feel YA. Another one from the library is All the Stars and Teeth by Adeline Grace. This is also the author of the Belladonna series, if you're familiar with that. I haven't personally read it, but I've heard good things. But according to my notes, a rebellious princess with dangerous magic sets sail across a deadly sea to prove her worth and protect her kingdom, encountering pirates, curses, and dark secrets along the way. So I feel like maybe some of these books might sound like very familiar and similar in formula, but I personally like eat these up. Again, this is a YA. I haven't really heard too much about it. I believe this preceded her Belladonna series, but curious to try it out. Now in the Libby app, I have the audiobook for On Stranger Tides by Tim Powers, and this actually is like the inspiration for like the Pirates of the Caribbean story, so I'm definitely intrigued by that. I love those movies. So this is a swashbuckling historical fantasy with pirates, voodoo magic, and a hunt for the Fountain of Youth, full of dark magic, sea battles, and supernatural danger on the high seas. So definitely feels like a classic story, and this is going to be more like adult fantasy. Now, last on my list is actually just like a historical fiction. It is not a fantasy as far as I know, but that is The Red Raven by Michael L. Clark. This is a local author to me, and I met him at a local like book festival, Books on the Bay, I believe was the name of the festival. This is a pretty like short adult historical fiction. I believe there is a second book as well, but the synopsis for this is a historical pirate tale about a fearless young woman who sails the globe to free the enslaved and strike fear into slave traders with her crimson-sailed ship. So that sounds really interesting. It's not really like, you know, treasure hunting. We're trying to like free slaves. So this is supposed to be like taking place around like Spain, I believe, or like the European like coast, that sort of thing. So it definitely sounds interesting. And when I got the book, he had like these cool like posters that are like aged to look like a wanted poster. So this is for 500 euros. But how cool is that? I thought that was so cool. Hopefully you can see that. Alright guys, that is all things pirates. I hope that you enjoyed this video. Obviously this is something that I really enjoy, so I had a lot of fun making this. But I hope you got some recommendations, or if you really liked one of these books and have read it, definitely let's chat in the comments. As I'm reading these books over the summer, I will definitely be updating on my other socials. On my like Instagram stories, I always post my reviews when I finish finish a book, like my links to my Goodreads and things like that. My TikTok and Instagram, I have videos, so I'll probably post individual reviews there. So there's content everywhere for you to like get, you know, the info on these books and everything. So definitely go and engage with me there, but let's chat in the comments, engage with me elsewhere, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys very soon. Bye!